I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, staring at the steam rising from my coffee, when my world shifted without warning. It wasn't a dramatic moment.
No, Sander. No creas.
Just an ordinary Tuesday morning that turned into something I would never forget.
Victoria.
Oh my goodness, congratulations. The voice came from outside. I turned and saw my neighbor, Mrs. Green, waving excitedly through my half-open door. I forced a polite smile. Congratulations for what? She blinked, her excitement faltering. Oh, I thought you knew. A cold sensation crept up my spine. Knew what? She stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly, as if delivering delicate news. Your grandson, he was born yesterday. I saw Daniel at the pharmacy. He was buying baby formula and cigars. He looked so proud. For a second, I didn't understand the words. They floated in the air between us, disconnected from reality. My grandson, I repeated. Yes, little Ethan, I think he said. The mug slipped slightly in my hand. I caught it just in time, but hot coffee spilled over my fingers. I didn't even feel the burn, because something far worse had just hit me. My grandson had been born, and no one told me. I managed to nod, say something polite, I don't even remember what, and close the door. The moment it shut, my legs gave out. I slid down against it, the wood cold against my back, my heart pounding so loudly it filled my ears. This couldn't be real. Daniel was my only son, my entire world after my husband passed. We weren't distant. We weren't estranged. We spoke less over the years, yes, but nothing like this. Nothing that could explain this. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Again. On the third attempt, someone picked up. Hello. It wasn't Daniel. It was his wife, Emily.
Her voice was calm. Too calm.
Emily, I just heard about the baby. Why didn't anyone call me? Is everything okay? I can come right now. A pause. Long enough to feel intentional. Victoria, she said carefully, we decided to keep things private for now.
Private.
The word landed like a slap. I'm his grandmother, I said, my voice barely steady. I understand, she replied, though her tone suggested she didn't. But we need time to bond as a family first. A family, as if I wasn't part of it. I just want to meet him, I whispered. Another pause. Then, softer but colder. Maybe in a few weeks. And then the line went dead. I stared at my phone. For 70 years, I had lived through loss, disappointment, grief. But nothing felt like this. I drove to the hospital anyway. I didn't think. I just moved. The building stood exactly as I remembered. Bright, sterile, full of beginnings. Inside, everything felt wrong. Too cheerful. Too normal. At the front desk, a young woman smiled at me. How can I help you? I'm here to see my grandson.
Ethan.
My son is Daniel Carter. She typed something, then hesitated. Her smile faded slightly. I'm sorry, but visitors are restricted. Only approved names are allowed. That must be a mistake, I said quickly. I'm his grandmother. She nodded politely. Let me check. I waited. Minutes stretched into something unbearable. Families passed by me, carrying balloons, flowers, laughter. I stood there empty-handed, alone. The receptionist returned, her expression apologetic.
I'm sorry.
You're not on the list. Not on the list. I almost laughed. Not on the list for my own grandson. I don't remember how I got back to my car. I just remember sitting there, gripping the steering wheel, unable to breathe properly. People walked past, smiling, celebrating. And I sat there, invisible. I called Daniel again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Finally, I left a message. Daniel, it's me. I know he's here. I just want to meet him. Please call me. My voice broke. I love you. He never called back.
Not that day.
Not the next. Not the day after. 3 days later, I got a message. Just a message. Mom, we need time. Emily is overwhelmed. We'll talk soon.
Soon.
Such a small word. Such a cruel one. That night, I sat in the room I had prepared. The nursery. I had spent weeks on it. Soft blankets. A small crib. Tiny clothes folded neatly in drawers. A rocking chair by the window. I had imagined holding him there, singing to him, being part of his life. Now the room felt wrong, like a place built for someone who would never come. I picked up a small onesie, still with the tag on, and for the first time in years, I cried like I couldn't stop. Not quiet tears, not controlled grief, but something raw,
Deep.
breaking. Because in that moment, I realized something I wasn't ready to accept. I hadn't just missed his birth. I had been excluded, deliberately, and I didn't know why. But I knew one thing. This wasn't the end of it. It was only the beginning. If someone had told me that silence could hurt more than words, I wouldn't have believed them. But over the next 3 years, I learned that silence can be sharp, precise, and merciless. At first, I kept waiting. Every morning, I woke up thinking, today he'll call. Every evening, I went to bed telling myself, maybe tomorrow. I carried my phone everywhere, even into the garden, even into the bathroom, afraid I might miss that one call that would fix everything. But the call never came. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually, silence became the only answer I ever received. I tried to reach out. Of course I did. I called Daniel countless times, always ending up listening to the same mechanical voicemail. I sent messages, simple ones at first. How are you? Is the baby okay? Can I see him? Then longer ones, warmer ones, desperate ones. None of them were answered. It was like speaking into a void that swallowed everything whole. When Ethan turned 1, I bought him a gift. A soft blue teddy bear that played a lullaby when you pressed its paw. I wrapped it carefully, wrote a card. Happy birthday, my sweet boy. Love, Grandma Victoria, and drove to their house. I didn't plan to go inside. I told myself I would just leave it at the door and walk away. But when I got there, I froze. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. The curtains were drawn. The driveway empty. No signs of life. I stood there for a long time before finally placing the gift by the door and leaving. 2 days later, the package was back on my porch. Unopened. No note.
No explanation.
That was the moment something inside me cracked. Still, I didn't give up immediately.
Hope is stubborn like that.
I went to places where I thought I might run into them. The park near their street, the weekend market Daniel used to love, even a small cafe Emily once mentioned. I would sit there, pretending to read or drink coffee, while my eyes scanned every face, every stroller, every passing family. But they were never there. It was as if they had erased themselves from every place I could reach. The second year was different, quieter. Not because things got better, but because I stopped trying so loudly. I stopped calling every day, then every week. Eventually, I stopped calling at all. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't handle hearing nothing anymore. Silence is easier when you stop knocking on the door. The nursery became unbearable. At first, I kept it exactly as it was, like preserving a memory that never had the chance to exist. But one evening, I walked in and realized it felt like a museum of my own heartbreak. I sat in the rocking chair, staring at the empty crib, and something shifted. Slowly, I began packing things away. Not throwing them out, never that, but folding them into boxes, sealing them carefully, as if I might need them someday. Though deep down, I wasn't sure I ever would. Loneliness settled into my life like an unwelcome guest who refused to leave. Holidays became the hardest, Christmas especially. I used to host dinner every year. Daniel would help me decorate the tree, complain about untangling the lights, laugh when I burned the cookies slightly. Now the house stayed quiet.
No lights.
No music. Just me, sitting in a room that echoed too much. My friends tried to help. They invited me out, checked in on me, suggested I take legal action. You have rights, one of them insisted. They can't just keep your grandson from you. But I couldn't do it. The idea of dragging my own son into court felt like crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. I wasn't ready to turn love into something legal, something forced. Instead, I tried to rebuild pieces of myself. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in decades. At first, my hands were stiff, unsure, but slowly, color returned to my life in small ways. I joined a local book club, though I rarely spoke during meetings. I just listened.
It was easier that way.
Being around people without having to explain my pain. But nights were still the worst. That's when the thoughts came. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Ethan looked like now. Was he walking? Talking? Did he laugh loudly like Daniel used to as a child? Did he have my eyes? My smile? Or had Emily made sure there was no trace of me in his world at all? Sometimes I wondered if they told him I didn't exist. Or worse, that I didn't care. That thought hurt more than anything else. By the third year, something changed again, but this time it wasn't pain. It was acceptance. Not the kind that brings peace, but the kind that comes when you realize you have no control. I stopped waiting. Truly stopped. I no longer checked my phone first thing in the morning. I no longer imagined surprise visits or apologies. I began to live, not happily, but steadily. I planted a small garden in my backyard. Tomatoes, herbs, a few flowers. Watching things grow helped in a quiet, simple way. Life continuing, even when parts of yours feel frozen. I even started making plans. Small ones. A short trip I had postponed for years. A class at the community center. Things that belonged only to me. And yet, no matter how much I tried to move forward, there was always a space inside me that remained untouched. A space shaped like a little boy I had never met. Then, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. I was outside, kneeling in the dirt, trying to save a struggling tomato plant, when I heard my name.
Victoria.
You need to check this. It was Mr. Lewis from next door, waving a newspaper in the air, his face full of excitement. I stood up, brushing dirt from my hands. What is it? The lottery numbers. I think you need to see this. I almost laughed. I had been playing the same numbers for years. It was a habit more than hope. A ritual that connected me to memories, birthdays, dates that once mattered. I walked inside, more curious than anything, and pulled the ticket from the drawer where I always kept it. My hands were steady, until they weren't. One number matched, then another, then another. By the time I reached the last one, I couldn't breathe. All 6 numbers. Every single one. I read them again, and again, and again. $3 million. The room felt suddenly too small. After 3 years of feeling invisible, forgotten, erased, something had just changed. For the first time in a very long time, I felt something unfamiliar. Not sadness, not anger, but possibility. And then my phone rang. I froze. I didn't need to look at the screen. Somehow, I already knew who it was. The phone kept ringing, sharp and insistent, cutting through the quiet of my kitchen like it belonged there, as if it hadn't been silent for 3 years. I stood still, staring at it, my heart already racing before I even looked at the screen. But I knew. Somehow I knew. When I finally picked it up, my fingers felt strangely numb, like they didn't belong to me anymore. And there it was, Daniel. For a moment, I just watched his name glow on the screen. 3 years. Over 1,000 days of silence. And now, suddenly, he was calling. I answered on the fourth ring. Hello. There was a pause. Just a second. But it was enough. Mom. His voice hadn't changed. That was the first thing that hit me. It sounded exactly the same as it always had. Familiar, warm, almost comforting. And for a brief, dangerous moment, it pulled me backward in time. Back to when he was a boy, calling me from school because he forgot his lunch. Back to Sunday evenings when he'd call just to talk. Back to a version of my life that didn't exist anymore. Daniel, I said quietly. My throat tightened around his name like it didn't want to let it out. I heard about the lottery, he continued, his tone shifting into something that felt rehearsed. That's incredible, Mom. Really? I'm so happy for you. Of course. Of course he had. The news had spread fast. Small town, big win, people talk. And suddenly, after 3 years of nothing, my son remembered I existed. Thank you, I replied, gripping the edge of the counter. There was another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear him choosing his next words carefully, like stepping across thin ice. Listen, I know it's been a while, he said, and I noticed how easily he said it.
A while.
As if 3 years could be reduced to something so small. And I feel really bad about that.
I mean, really bad.
I didn't say anything, because I wanted to hear how far he would go. We've been talking, he continued quickly. Emily and I. And we think it's time, for you to meet Ethan.
Properly.
As his grandmother. The words landed in my chest, heavy and complicated. 3 years. 3 years of being shut out. And now, it was suddenly time? I see, I said calmly. My voice surprised even me. It didn't shake. It didn't break. It just existed. He asks about you, Daniel added, and something in his tone shifted again, softer, almost persuasive. All the time.
We've told him so much about you.
He really wants to meet you. I closed my eyes. That was the moment something inside me clicked. Because I knew. Ethan was 3 years old. Children that age don't ask about people they've never seen, never heard about, never been allowed to know. This wasn't truth. This was strategy. What kind of things have you told him? I asked quietly. There was a slight rustling sound on the other end, like someone whispering nearby.
Emily.
Oh, Daniel said quickly, how kind you are. How you used to make those amazing cookies when I was a kid. I told him you make the best chocolate chip cookies in the world. The cookies, of all things. I almost smiled, not because it was sweet, but because it was predictable. I remember those, I said softly. You used to beg me to pack extra for school. He laughed lightly, relieved, as if we had just stepped back into something normal. Yeah, exactly. There was a pause again, and this time I didn't fill it. I let it sit, let him feel it. So, we were thinking, he continued, maybe this weekend? Saturday? We could come by your place. Spend some time together. Make it special. This weekend. 4 days after the lottery announcement. 3 years and 4 days since I stopped being family. That sounds nice, I said.
And it did.
Not because of them, but because of Ethan. Great, Daniel said quickly, relief flooding his voice. That's great. He's going to be so excited. I didn't respond to that, because we both knew it wasn't true. After we hung up, I didn't move right away. I just stood there in my kitchen, staring at nothing. The ticket was still on the counter in front of me. The numbers blurred slightly as my vision shifted, not from tears this time, but from something else.
Clarity.
For 3 years, I had asked myself the same questions over and over again. What did I do wrong? Where did I fail? How did I lose my son? I replayed memories like scenes in a film, searching for the moment everything broke. But now, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't about something I did. This was about something they chose. Daniel hadn't forgotten me. He had simply decided I wasn't necessary. Until now. I let out a slow breath and sat down at the table. The house felt different. Not warmer. Not happier. Just clearer. Like a fog had lifted, revealing something I hadn't wanted to see before. I reached for my phone again.
Not to call Daniel.
Not to call anyone from my past, but to call someone who had helped me survive these past years. Dr. Harris speaking. It's Victoria, I said. I need to see you. Today, if possible. There was no hesitation in her response. Of course.
Come in.
An hour later, I was sitting across from her in her office, hands folded tightly in my lap. He called, I said simply. She nodded, waiting. He wants me to meet my grandson. This weekend. And how do you feel about that? I considered the question carefully. Angry, I admitted, but also curious. Curious? I want to see them, I said. I want to see what this looks like now, after everything. She studied me for a moment. And the money? She asked gently. There it was. The question I had been avoiding. I looked down at my hands. When I first realized I won, I said slowly, the first thing I thought about was Ethan, his future, his education, everything I could give him. And now, I looked up. Now my voice was steady. I'm not going to be used. She nodded. That's an important realization. I still want to meet him. I added quickly. That hasn't changed. But I'm not going to let them turn me into something transactional. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just real. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I baked. The kitchen filled with the familiar scent of butter, sugar, and chocolate. For a moment, it felt like time had folded in on itself. Like I was back in a life where things made sense. But this time it was different. This time, I wasn't baking out of hope. I was baking out of choice. As I placed the cookies into the oven, I made a decision. A clear one. A final one. I wasn't going to react. I wasn't going to beg. And I definitely wasn't going to play the role they expected. If they wanted a performance, I would give them one. But not the kind they were expecting. By the time the cookies were done, golden and perfect, my plan was already forming. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of something far more powerful. Self-respect. I placed the cookies carefully into a tin, closed the lid, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt ready. Saturday arrived too slowly and too quickly at the same time. I woke up before sunrise, even though I had barely slept. Not from excitement, but from anticipation. The kind that sits heavy in your chest, quiet but impossible to ignore. My house was spotless, cleaner than it had been in years. Not because I thought they cared, but because I needed control over something. I set the cookies out on the table in a simple tin, the same one I used when Daniel was a child. It felt deliberate, almost symbolic. By noon, I was already sitting by the window, watching the street. Every passing car made my heart react, even though I told myself it didn't matter. And then, finally, a dark SUV turned into my driveway. I froze. There they were. Daniel stepped out first. He looked older, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. There was tension in his posture, something restless behind his movements. Then Emily got out of the passenger side, and even from a distance, I could see she had changed. Not just physically, though that too, Her appearance was sharper, more polished, almost too perfect. But it was her expression that stood out. Calculating. Observing. And then the back door opened.
Ethan.
My grandson. For a moment, everything else disappeared. Daniel lifted him out of the car, and I felt something in my chest tighten, so suddenly I had to grip the edge of the window frame to steady myself. He wasn't a baby. Of course he wasn't. 3 years had passed. But seeing it was something else entirely. He was small, but not fragile. A real little person, with dark hair, Daniel's hair, and curious eyes that scanned everything around him. I opened the door before they could knock. "Daniel," I said, forcing a warm tone. He hesitated for just a fraction of a second before stepping forward and hugging me. It wasn't the same. I felt it immediately. Familiar, but distant. Like muscle memory, without emotion. Mom. "Emily," I said next. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Victoria, it's so good to see you."
Polite. Perfect.
Empty. And then I looked at him.
Ethan.
He was holding onto Daniel's shoulder, his small hand gripping the fabric of his shirt, half hiding his face. "Hello," I said softly, lowering my voice instinctively.
He didn't respond.
Just watched me, studied me, like I was a stranger. And, in truth, I was. "This is Grandma Victoria," Daniel said gently. "Remember?" Ethan didn't answer. He just buried his face into Daniel's neck. "He's a little shy," Emily said quickly, stepping in. "He'll warm up." I nodded, but inside something twisted. Because he wasn't shy. He was unfamiliar. We moved into the living room, and I watched everything carefully. Not just them, but how they moved, how they spoke, how they looked around. Emily's eyes traveled across the room with subtle precision. The furniture, the shelves, the details. Not admiration, assessment. "Your home is lovely," she said. It sounded practiced. "Thank you," I replied simply. I offered drinks. Lemonade, coffee. Something normal. Something grounding. And then I brought out the cookies. The moment the tin opened, something shifted. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Cookies," he said quietly. The first word he had spoken to me. "Yes," I smiled. "Would you like one?" He looked at Emily. "Permission. Always permission." "Just one," she said quickly. He took it carefully, small fingers wrapping around something I had made for him, years too late. He took a bite. And then something beautiful happened. His face lit up. "Good," he said, crumbs falling onto his shirt. I felt my chest ache. "What do you say?" Emily prompted immediately. "Thank you," he said, glancing at me. "Thank you, Grandma." That word, it hit deeper than I expected. For the next hour, everything felt like a performance. Not obvious, not dramatic, but there. Daniel talked about work, carefully avoiding details. Emily filled the silence with compliments and small talk. They asked about my life, but not in a way that felt genuine, more like ticking boxes. And slowly, inevitably, the conversation shifted. "So," Daniel said casually, "have you thought about what you'll do with the money?" There it was. I kept my expression neutral. "A little." Emily leaned forward slightly. "It must be such a big change. Life-changing, really." "Yes," I said. "It is." Ethan sat on the floor nearby, playing with a small book I had given him. Occasionally, he would look up at me, still unsure, but less distant now. And that made everything harder. Because this moment, this small connection was real, even if everything around it wasn't. "We've been thinking a lot about the future," Daniel continued. "You know, Ethan's education opportunities." I nodded slowly. "Of course." Emily added, "We just want what's best for him." "Of course you do." The words echoed in my mind, but I didn't say them out loud. Instead, I stood up. Excuse me for a moment. I walked into the kitchen, needing space. Just a few seconds to breathe. To steady myself, I gripped the counter, staring at nothing. This was exactly what I expected. And yet it still hurt. Not because of them, but because of him, Ethan. When I returned, he was sitting quietly, holding the cookie tin in his lap, examining it like it was something important. Do you like it? I asked softly, sitting beside him. He nodded. Can I have another one? I smiled gently. Maybe later. He seemed to accept that. Children are simple like that. They don't manipulate. They don't calculate. They just feel. And that's what made everything else so ugly. As the visit went on, I noticed more details. Small ones, but telling. The way Emily corrected Ethan quickly, sharply, if he did something slightly out of line. The way Daniel avoided eye contact when certain topics came up. The way they exchanged quick glances when money was mentioned. They weren't subtle. They just thought I wouldn't notice. The most revealing moment came when Ethan spilled a little juice on himself. Instinctively, I reached for a napkin. But before I could even touch him, "Don't," Emily said sharply. The word cut through the room. She immediately softened her tone. "I've got it." She pulled him toward her quickly. Too quickly. Ethan frowned slightly, confused. And, in that moment, I understood everything. This wasn't about space. It wasn't about adjustment. It was control. Pure, simple control. And Daniel had allowed it. When they finally stood up to leave, the air felt heavier. "Thank you for today," Daniel said. "We should do this again," Emily added quickly. I smiled. Maybe. Ethan looked at me. "Bye, Grandma." I knelt slightly to his level. "Goodbye, sweetheart." For a brief second, I considered hugging him, but I didn't, because I already knew it wouldn't be simple. I stood at the door, watching them walk back to the car, watching my grandson get buckled into his seat, watching a life I had been excluded from drive away again. But this time, something was different. I wasn't broken. I wasn't begging. I wasn't waiting. I closed the door slowly, walked back into the quiet house, and picked up my phone. It was time. The moment the door closed behind them, the silence in my house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt clear. Not peaceful, not comforting, but sharp, like a line drawn between what had been and what I now understood. I stood there for a few seconds, still facing the door, as if something might change if I waited long enough. But nothing did. No sudden realization, no apology, no turning back. Just quiet. Real, honest quiet. I walked slowly back into the living room and sat down, looking at the cookie tin Ethan had held in his small hands. There were crumbs left inside, tiny traces of something innocent in the middle of something deeply calculated. That contrast stayed with me, because for the first time, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't asking questions. I wasn't trying to understand what I had done wrong. I knew the truth, and the truth had nothing to do with me. The next morning, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice unusually light. "I just wanted to say thank you again for yesterday. It meant a lot. Ethan hasn't stopped talking about you." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Of course he hasn't. Did he? I asked calmly. "Yeah," Daniel continued quickly. "He really liked the cookies. And, we were thinking maybe we could do this more often. Like rebuild things." Rebuild. Such an easy word. "So you want to see me again?" I said. "Of course," he replied. "Your family." There it was again. Family. A word that had disappeared for 3 years and suddenly returned, polished and convenient. "That's nice," I said. There was a pause, and I could almost feel him shifting, preparing to move the conversation where he wanted it to go. Mom, there's something else we wanted to talk about, he added carefully. Of course there is. I didn't respond right away. He continued anyway. You know things have been a little difficult lately, financially. I didn't want to bring it up yesterday, but that word carried everything. Go on, I said quietly. Well, I lost my job a few months ago, he admitted. We've been trying to manage, but it's been tough. And with the house, the bills, Ethan, it's just a lot. I closed my eyes for a moment, not because I didn't expect it, but because hearing it out loud made it real. And I asked, and we thought maybe you could help us.
Just for a while.
Until things stabilize. There it was, not even hidden anymore. I exhaled slowly. I'll think about it, I said. Of course, he replied quickly, relief slipping into his voice. Take your time. After we hung up, I didn't feel angry. Not yet. Just certain. By the afternoon, Emily called. Her tone was different.
Softer.
Warmer. Carefully constructed. Victoria, I just wanted to tell you how much yesterday meant to us, she said. It really felt like a fresh start. A fresh start. As if nothing had happened. I'm glad you feel that way, I replied. I do, she continued. And seeing you with Ethan, you're such a natural. He really connected with you. That part almost hurt, because it was the only true thing she said. He's a wonderful child, I said. He is, she agreed quickly. And we just want to give him the best life possible. There it is again, always leading back. Of course, I said. She hesitated slightly before continuing. We've been under a lot of pressure lately. Financial pressure. And we were hoping maybe you could be part of helping us through this. There was no hesitation now.
No pretending.
Just a direct path to what they wanted. I understand, I said. And I did. More than they realized. The call ended politely. Too politely. But something inside me had already shifted. That evening, I went to the grocery store. Not because I needed anything, but because I needed to move. To be around people. To hear noise that wasn't inside my own head. I was standing in one of the aisles, absent-mindedly looking at things I didn't plan to buy, when I heard a voice. Emily's voice. I froze. She was in the next aisle. And she wasn't alone. I moved slightly, just enough to hear without being seen. I'm telling you, the timing couldn't have been more perfect, she said. Her tone was completely different now.
No wodoms. No softness.
Just sharp. What do you mean? Another woman asked. Daniel's mom winning that money right now, Emily replied. We were about to lose everything. My grip tightened around the cart. Lose everything? Is it really that bad? The other woman asked. Worse, Emily said. We're behind on payments, and Daniel hasn't found anything stable yet. We were running out of options. I felt my chest tighten. So it was true. But then, she laughed. A short, cold laugh. But honestly, this solved everything. Something inside me went still. How? Her friend asked. Because now we have her, Emily said simply. My breath caught. What do you mean? The woman pressed. Emily lowered her voice slightly, but I could still hear every word. She's been desperate to be part of Ethan's life. 3 years of being shut out? That kind of loneliness makes people easy. Easy. The word echoed in my mind. All we had to do was open the door a little, she continued, and she walked right in.
I felt something shift inside me.
Not pain. Not even anger. Something colder. What if she doesn't help? The friend asked. Emily didn't hesitate. She will, she said confidently. People like her always do, especially when you remind them what they might lose. Silence followed. Heavy.
Clear.
And in that silence, Everything became undeniable. I stepped back slowly, my hands steady now, my thoughts sharper than they had been in years.
No confusión.
No doubt, just truth. I left the cart right there and walked out of the store without looking back. When I got home, I didn't sit down right away. I walked through the house slowly, looking at everything differently. The walls, the furniture, the quiet. This wasn't a place of loneliness anymore. It was a place of clarity. I picked up my phone and called my financial advisor. "I'm ready," I said. "For what?" she asked. "For everything we discussed," I replied. "I want it done immediately." There was a brief pause. "Are you sure?" "Yes." And I was, because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding, and that made all the difference. By the time Thursday evening arrived, I was no longer unsure of anything. Not about Daniel, not about Emily, and not about what I was going to do. The uncertainty that had followed me for 3 years was gone, replaced by something far more solid. It wasn't anger, even though I had every right to feel it. It wasn't sadness either, though that still lived somewhere deep inside me. It was clarity, the kind that doesn't ask questions anymore because it already knows the answers. I stood in front of their house for a moment before knocking. It was larger than mine, newer, polished in a way that looked impressive from the outside. Perfect lawn, clean windows, everything arranged like a picture meant to convince people that life inside was just as perfect. But now I knew better. I knew what was hiding beneath that surface.
Debt.
Pressure. Desperation. And most importantly, intent. Daniel opened the door quickly, almost as if he had been waiting right behind it. "Mom, you're here," he said, smiling a little too eagerly. "Of course," I replied, stepping inside. Emily appeared a second later, her expression warm, controlled, practiced down to the smallest detail. "Victoria, we're so glad you came," she said. And just like that, the performance began again. The house smelled like dinner, something carefully prepared, something meant to impress. The table was already set, every detail in place. It looked like effort, like intention, but I could see through it now. Every gesture had a purpose. Every word had direction. And then, Grandma. Ethan ran toward me, not hesitating this time, not hiding. He wrapped his arms around my legs, and for a brief second, everything else disappeared. I placed my hand gently on his back, feeling how real he was, how innocent, how completely separate from everything his parents were doing. "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly. "You came," he said, looking up at me. "Yes," I answered. "I did." That moment almost broke me, because it was real. And that made everything else even harder. Dinner went exactly as I expected. Conversation flowed easily on the surface. Too easily. Daniel talked about job opportunities, carefully framing his situation without sounding too desperate. Emily added small details, reinforcing the story, shaping it into something sympathetic but controlled. They complimented me, included me, made it feel like I had always been part of this again. But underneath it all, there was a current, always moving in one direction. Money. After dinner, Ethan sat beside me with a book, leaning slightly against my arm as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I read to him quietly while Daniel and Emily watched from across the room. I could feel their eyes, their calculations, their patience. They were waiting. And eventually it came. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, can we talk for a minute?" I closed the book gently. "Of course." Ethan stayed close, holding onto my hand as if he didn't want me to go anywhere. That small gesture almost made everything harder than it needed to be. Daniel and Emily sat across from me. Serious now. Focused. "This isn't easy for us," Daniel began. "But we're in a difficult position. I told you before, things have gotten worse." Emily nodded, her expression carefully concerned. We've done everything we can, she added, but we're running out of options. I didn't interrupt. I let them speak, because I wanted to hear it fully. We're behind on the house, Daniel continued. If we can't catch up soon, we might lose it. And that would mean moving, Emily said softly. Possibly far away. Somewhere more affordable. There it was. The setup. And Ethan, Daniel added, glancing toward him. Emily finished the sentence. He would be far from you. Silence filled the room.
Heavy.
Intentional. How much? I asked. They exchanged a quick look. 200,000, Daniel said. The number didn't shock me. I had expected something like that. That's a lot, I replied. It would only be temporary, he said quickly. We'd pay you back. This is just to get us through. Temporary. Just like the last 3 years, I thought. I stood up slowly. Give me a moment, I said. I stepped outside onto the patio, the cool evening air hitting my face. For a second, I closed my eyes.
Not to think.
Because I already had. Everything was already done. I pulled out my phone and made one call. Is it complete? I asked. Yes, came the answer. Everything has been transferred. Good, I said. And I meant it. When I walked back inside, everything looked exactly the same. Daniel, Emily, waiting. Ethan on the couch, fighting sleep, his small body curled into the cushions. I walked over and gently brushed his hair back from his forehead. He looked up at me, half asleep. Grandma, I'm here, I whispered. Then I stood up and turned to face them. I've made my decision, I said. They leaned forward slightly. Hope, expectation, confidence. I'm not giving you any money. The words landed cleanly.
No hesitation. No apology.
Nothing. Silence followed. Daniel blinked. Emily's expression froze. I'm sorry, what? She asked. I said no. I repeated. Daniel stood up slightly, confusion turning into something else. Mom, I don't understand. We just explained. I heard you, I said calmly. I understood everything. Emily's tone sharpened. Then how can you say no? We're family. I looked at her. Really looked. For 3 years, I said slowly. I wasn't family. Neither of them spoke. You kept my grandson from me. Not because you needed time. Not because you were overwhelmed. But because you chose to. That's not fair, Emily snapped.
No, y replied quietly.
What's not fair is thinking you can disappear for 3 years and return only when you need something. Daniel's face paled. Mom, please.
This isn't like that.
It is exactly like that, I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Every dollar I won is gone. They stared at me. What do you mean? Emily asked. I donated it, I said simply. All of it. The silence that followed was absolute. You're lying, she whispered. Call the bank, I replied. You'll get the same answer. Daniel sank back into his chair. Why would you do that? He asked. I looked at him. Because he deserved the truth. Because I'm not something you can come back to only when it's convenient, I said. I'm not an opportunity. I'm not a solution to your problems. Emily's mask finally broke. You're selfish, she said sharply. Do you even care about your grandson? I turned toward Ethan. Still asleep. Peaceful. Innocent. I care about him enough not to let him grow up thinking love is something you trade, I said. No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to say. I walked to the door. And this time, I didn't hesitate. Mom, Daniel said behind me, his voice weaker now. Please. I stopped. But I didn't turn around. You had me, I said quietly, for years. And you chose not to. Then I opened the door and walked out. The air outside felt different. Lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because something inside me finally was. As I drove home, I didn't cry. Not once. For the first time in 3 years, I felt free. Not from them, but from waiting, from hoping, from needing something that was never going to be given freely. I still thought about Ethan.
Of course I did.
I always would. But now, I also thought about myself. And that was something I had forgotten how to do. That night, I sat in my quiet house, holding a cup of tea, and realized something simple, but powerful. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is choose yourself. And sometimes that's the only thing that sets you free.